Hi, Medea. Thank you so much for being with us today. With so much going on in the country and the world, there's definitely many important things to talk about. In the US, it's become common now for ICE agents wearing masks to snatch people off the streets. And there's also currently attacks against your organization, Code Pink. Members of Congress have made allegations against you, claiming that you're backed by China or by Iran or by Russia in some cases, and they say that you support Hamas and that you're a foreign agent. What's your response to them?
You know, in the past we used to laugh because it's so absurd. I mean, I myself have been protesting since the time of Vietnam, and nobody ever pays me to protest. But now it's gotten more serious because we're in very dangerous times. And given the way they're snatching up students on the street, green card holders, taking people's phones when they come into this country, taking their electronics. We have members of Congress who are asking for the Attorney General to investigate us. It's starting to get more serious. So there are, we certainly are not going to be silenced, but we do worry about the escalating attacks on people who are simply speaking out against genocide. So it's dangerous times.
And can you speak out about the particular claims that these members of Congress have made against you and what kind of actions you're taking against them?
Well, there are several. For example, there are four members of the Republican Party that have asked for us to be investigated because they say we are providing aid and abetting illegal aliens. I think that just means that on our website we tell people what their rights are if they're confronted by ICE agents. There's another senator who has asked for us to be investigated for our links to the Chinese Communist Party, and this is one they've been using for the last year. We have zero contact with the Chinese Communist Party. We get zero money from them. Once when I made a visit to Iran, and we believe in traveling all over, especially to countries where the US has bad relations, I was greeted by people from the FBI who said that I should register as a foreign agent for Iran, which is absurd. So, we just keep waiting to see if they're going to get any more deliberate with us. But in the meantime, we fight back, not only through articles on social media and the media, also by sort of mocking them. For example, we turn around and say that it's actually the head of the Senate Intelligence Committee, who is Tom Cotton, who is a foreign agent because he represents Israel. He's gotten millions of dollars from AIPAC lobby groups when he first ran for Senate in 2014. And he continues to take hundreds of thousands of dollars from AIPAC. And so it's quite interesting that they accuse us of getting money from foreign countries when they're the ones who get money from lobby groups that represent a foreign country.
Yeah, certainly. Like while they're claiming that you get funded by China, or they even can't decide who you get funded by, they seem to change that. Meanwhile, they're getting millions of dollars from AIPAC, clearly being funded by a foreign entity. Now, when we look at what's happening in America, do you see that there is an attack on free speech? Are things getting worse? That seems to be the worry at this moment, looking at the green card holders being snatched up. Should American citizens be worried of these developments too?
We're terrified by what is happening. I mean, we haven't seen anything like this in our lifetimes. It goes back to the 1950s when there was what we call the McCarthy scare, the Red Scare, when people were accused of being communist and they lost their jobs, and it was a terrible time. It seems like we're going into that kind of what some are calling neo-McCarthyism. The snatching up of students who are here legally, have committed no crimes, is casting a pall on all kinds of people who have been speaking out, particularly around Palestine. We find that the people who used to come with us in the halls of Congress are afraid to come, a lot of them. Certainly if they are green card holders, if they are students, we find that the repression against students has been so severe that many students are afraid to be seen in protests. It is certainly a different kind of feeling we have right now. I can't tell you the number of people who have said to me, I'm scared. I'm afraid to leave the country. I don't know if they'll let me right back into the country. I don't know if they'll take my phone away from me and look at all of my contacts, and would that get anybody in trouble? And I'm afraid to like things on social media now. Will that get me in trouble? And we keep saying them to people, look, if you act scared, if you let them intimidate you, then they're winning. They're only doing this now because they're losing in the court of public opinion. They're losing certainly in the global opinion, and they're getting desperate, and that's why they're doing these kinds of things. You know, I read an article recently going back to this issue of AIPAC and the lobby groups that said the members of Congress don't vote away because AIPAC tells them to do it. They vote because they see what the public opinion is. Well, that was written 2 decades ago. Now public opinion has totally changed, and the majority of people are not sympathetic to Israel anymore. And the number of people more sympathetic to Palestine has kept growing. So now there's only 46% of the population that is sympathetic to Israel. And if you there's a real generational breakdown. So if you look at the young people, they're way more sympathetic to Palestine. So why don't we have in Congress that same kind of breakdown, with half the members of Congress should be putting out legislation that says no more weapons to Israel, stop the genocide, we won't continue to back Netanyahu. But that's not what we're seeing.
Yeah. As you mentioned, you made many very important points. But yes, the Congress definitely doesn't represent accurately the amount of Americans who are concerned for Palestine, who are not supporting America's relationship with Israel. But that doesn't seem like the path Donald Trump has taken so far. But prior to his election, there was hopes that Trump can be a president for peace. He made claims like that, saying that he's going to bring about peace not only in Palestine, but also between Ukraine and Russia. What's your take on how his term has turned out so far? And do you think he has some potential to be a peacemaker in some area of the world?
I think in the case of Ukraine, perhaps, and I'm hoping. We always were asking Biden, talk to Putin, start negotiations. This endless war is just harmful toward the people of Ukraine who are exhausted from war, and it's taking billions and billions of dollars from the American public. We have to start negotiations. And Biden refused to talk to Putin. So we were glad when we heard, you know, in the early days of the Trump administration, that he got on the phone and had a 90-minute, a long phone call with Putin. You know, it's had its ups and downs. I think the way he has treated Zelensky in public is not the role of a negotiator. You know, he can be extremely undiplomatic, to put it nicely. But I think there can be progress made in the case of Ukraine. In the case of the Middle East, you know, we also had hope because it was because of Trump that we got the ceasefire. You know, we didn't get a ceasefire during Biden's time.
Right.
And so we were hopeful. But that hope has been dashed, seeing Israel just destroy the negotiations, refuse to go into phase 2, start the killing again, and Trump siding with Netanyahu during this whole time. And not only that, we see the increase in the attacks on Yemen, which is, you know, so ridiculous because we know very clearly that the Yemenis, and particularly the Houthis, have said we will stop the attacks in the Red Sea when the genocide stops. And we saw that they did do that, indeed, when the ceasefire was in place. And when the ceasefire was broken by Israel, they started up again. So instead of attacking Yemen, we should be negotiating, forcing Netanyahu to go back to the ceasefire.
Hmm. And do you think a lot of analysts say that Trump can force Netanyahu into ceasefire? He has the influence to do it. But what do you see happening now? Now that Israel has started targeting Gaza again, thousands are already dead. Do you see any hope for a ceasefire in the near future?
No, I can't imagine that there won't be a ceasefire. There's got to be a ceasefire. I mean, how much can people suffer? And we've been saying this for so long, like, where is the world community? Where is the rule of law? Where are the Arab leaders? And yes, they met and they came forward with their own plan for how Gaza could be rebuilt. But then they're not doing anything to force Israel to stop the bombing. And they're not even doing anything particularly forceful in the United Nations. I would like the world to gang up on the United States and say, you have to stop the support for Israel. You have to stop sending the weapons. Because look, at the end of the day, Israel could not do what it's doing without US weapons. Everybody knows that. And so it is up to Trump, really, to decide when enough is enough. And I think, that comes when there's enough of an outcry to say, we just can't keep watching this every day.
Yeah, and speaking of sending weapons to Israel, there's a vote in Congress coming up, particularly on this issue. Can you talk about the activism work you'll be doing around this vote and the work you do in general in the halls of Congress, the kind of videos that kind of made you famous for a lot of people, seeing you chase down senators? Can you talk about that work and how that's going to change perhaps under this current climate?
We have had one other vote in the past in the Senate on stopping weapons, introduced by Bernie Sanders, a Jewish member of the Senate, and we got 19 senators to vote on that. That's about 40% of the Democrats. We didn't get one Republican to vote that way. Now we're having another chance to see, can we get even more of them? We feel like, we know it's not going to pass, but we feel it's so important to get these senators on record. And it's tough for these senators because they're getting pressured by AIPAC. They're getting a lot of calls into their offices saying, you better not vote to stop these weapons to Israel. And they're getting a lot of calls from our side as well. And in the past, their calculation has been, well, AIPAC is more powerful, so I think I'll go with AIPAC. But you just got to think at some point, their own conscience, their own morality will kick in. We're still waiting for that. But we are in the halls of Congress every single day because we think it's so important to be there. We know that these pro-Israel lobby groups are there. They might not physically be there, but they're sending in their checks all the time. They're meeting with their Congress people in their districts as well as in Washington. And so we want to be a presence as well. And we are. And some of the videos that we do are us chasing down these members of Congress to say, when are you going to stop supporting the genocide? When are you going to speak out about the kidnapping of students on our streets in broad daylight by masked men who are not even identified? When are you going to have some kind of moral conscience about the children that are being killed every day? Have you looked at the starvation that it's been almost a month that Israel hasn't let food into Gaza? So, we kind of run after them asking these very, very serious questions. And in the beginning, they'd engage with us more. I think now they're being told by their leaders to try not to talk to us. But we still run after them anyway because they're elected officials and they should have to respond to the public.
Yes, and you're doing a great job of holding them accountable to the public in that way, for sure.
Well, yes, and I don't know if you've seen any of the town halls, the meetings they have when they go back to their districts,
Right.
But they have been interrupted not just about the issue of Gaza and Palestine, but also about the broader issues about what Trump is doing in the cutting of government agencies, the threats to so many people's livelihoods, the threats to cut basic social safety net like Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. So these Congress people, when they go back to their districts, they're getting an earful from their constituents.
Mm-hmm. And the upcoming vote, you mentioned that Bernie Sanders had introduced it the previous time. a senator of Jewish descent, and you also come from a Jewish background. Can you speak to how important for Jewish voices within America to speak out for Palestine? Can you speak on that?
Well, yes, because everybody who speaks out is being labeled an anti-Semite. You know, everything is anti-Semitism. There's been about 14 hearings in Congress on anti-Semitism. In the meantime, look at who is really being attacked. It's the people who are speaking out for Palestine. And yet, that's hardly ever discussed. And that's why it's important for those of us who are Jewish to speak out, because our voices are so important right now. I mean, they can call you a self-hating Jew, and certainly they do that. They do that to Bernie Sanders. They do that to all of us who speak out as members of the Jewish community. But there are so many of us. And this is also reflected in the generational difference, because if you look at the younger generation of Jewish Americans, they are more sympathetic to Palestine as well. So it's a changing demographic, and that's why we do see a lot of young Jews that are part of groups like Jewish Voice for Peace, another group of young Jewish people called If Not Now, and they're very important. And it's really interesting when you look at the encampments that happened last year in the colleges. So many of the people who came out to those were Jewish students, and there were Jewish religious services during those encampments, guarded by Muslim students. I mean, it was beautiful, the kind of interaction that there was. And I think it's so sad that the pro-Israel forces have been so aggressive in labeling people who are speaking out against genocide as anti-Semites, because they're not.
Yeah, yes, very important perspective you bring there. And now, like you mentioned, that we're in unprecedented times. Like you've been demonstrating since Vietnam, since the McCarthy era, but what we're seeing now is perhaps unprecedented and never seen before. Where do you see things headed for America from here on? Is things gonna get worse? Is there gonna be more encroachment on free speech? Maybe they'll start snatching Americans instead of green card holders. What do you see happening?
I have no idea. This is uncharted territory that we're in right now. I think the people were shocked that green card holders who are legal, who have a path to citizenship, are supposed to have the same equal rights as citizens, are being snatched up. And so, yes, I think that we shouldn't be complacent just because we're citizens. Certainly, people like myself who have a history of going to countries, whether it's to Yemen or Afghanistan or Iran or places that North Korea I've been to, we are given secondary screening when we return to the country, and it is disconcerting how they are looking at us now as not American, as traitors. And so, yes, we have no idea where we're going. I do think that with American people, what they care about most is the economy. And I think that some of Trump's policies of putting these tremendous tariffs on goods coming into the country is creating inflation, is going to hurt the pocketbooks of the American people. And that's where you're going to see them rising up. And we'll probably see that as we get close to the next congressional elections. And maybe that will be a force that will kind of tone down this administration. The other thing we're seeing is other countries around the world rising up and saying, we're not going to live by the dictates of the United States. You know, they have been for years now forging new relationships like the BRICS. And it's funny, the opposite effect that U.S. policies are having of pushing countries closer to China, pushing Russia and China closer to each other, pushing Iran, Russia and China closer to each other. At some point, there has to be blowback. And I think that we see already in this administration so much contradiction. For example, take the issue of Iran. There are some people in the administration who say it's important to talk to Iran. A war with Iran would be terrible. And you hear conciliatory tones coming from Trump. And the next day you hear just the opposite. You know, if Iran doesn't do what we want, we're going to blow them to smithereens. And that's certainly not the way to get the Iranians to the negotiating table. We're seeing ups and downs constantly when it comes to the Middle East, when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to even the way that Trump talks about his good friend Putin one day, and the next day he's very angry at Putin. So how are we supposed to know where this is leading? I think unpredictability is the main basis of this administration, and I think they do it on purpose to keep us jumping. But there is one other thing I'd like to point out, which is that people in this country are traditionally call themselves Republicans or Democrats or independents. I think that's starting to change. And when Bernie Sanders has been traveling around many of the states in the middle of this country, he's getting a big audience of people who voted for Trump, who might have considered themselves Republican, and they're starting to question it now. And you get many Democrats who maybe were lifelong Democrats, but were so disappointed with Joe Biden and his presidency and started to kind of leave the Democratic Party. So I think there are more and more people who aren't really concerned about party affiliation. And there we can unite over issues rather than around party politics. And that's where I find some hope. For example, I'll give you one that's very interesting. People who were involved in the January 6th insurrection. These are what we call the MAGA people, the Make America Great Again stalwarts of Donald Trump. When they were in prison, before they got pardoned by Donald Trump, they saw the terrible conditions in the prisons. They saw the racism against the black people in this country in the prisons. They saw the power trip of the people who run the prisons. And some of them came out and said, I'm going to dedicate my life to helping the people I left behind in the prison and work for prison reform. And so they're working up with people who would consider themselves on the left, people who would consider themselves Democrat, to come together around that issue. So that's just an example where people are starting to shed a little bit that party affiliation and look more at what can unite us.
Mm-hmm. And that's very important to say, what can unite us in these bleak times. You do have a message of hope as well, you know, going to the future. And I guess you need some hope, right? To be like you and to be active for so many years, be an activist, you need to see a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, in terms of the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, you know, maybe because I'm in my 70s now, I've seen a lot, and things are cyclical. And we see them not just in the United States, we see them all around the world, where things go up and down and good and bad. And the only thing that we can do is, thank God when we get up in the morning we're alive. We can put our feet on the ground. We can face another day. We have a saying that says, a protest a day keeps the fascists away. So, you know, get out and organize, bring people together, be loud, be unapologetic, not be afraid. I mean, those are the key things to retain the semblance or the reality of a democracy in this country. So I would just say that the worst thing is to give in, the worst thing is to be scared, the worst thing is to be depressed. And a lot of people are depressed. You got to get out of that and get up every day to think, what can I do to help the people in Gaza? What can I do to help the people who are suffering, whether it's an earthquake or whatever is happening around the world? What can I do to make the world a better place? And that will make you feel a lot better about the state of things.
Thank you so much, Medea. So many important insights that you shared with us here today. Thank you for coming on. Thank you.
Thank you.